The Void Reaper drifted through the cosmic graveyard of Sector Nemesis 7, its obsidian hull reflecting the deathlight of 1,000 dead stars. For 3 millennia, the massive dreadnought had slumbered in the forgotten reaches of space, its quantum processors cycling through dreams of extinct civilizations and wars that had reshaped the galaxy's very foundations. Captain Vexmiral of the Hegemony research vessel, Entropy's Edge, studied the massive human construct through his ship's enhanced sensors. The alien's chitinous features twisted in what passed for a frown among his species. "Impossible," he whispered in the clicking tongue of the Velthari. "The humans died out 2,000 years ago." His science officer, Quinara, her 4 arms, dancing across holographic displays, confirmed what they were both seeing. Biosignatures are minimal, but present. The ship's core is awakening. Her voice carried the tremor of fear that had echoed through galactic history whenever humanity was mentioned. The Hegemony had inherited a galaxy scarred by human ambition. Ancient battlefields still bore the molecular scars of weapons that defied physics. Entire star systems remained quarantined, their very space-time twisted by technologies that made veteran admirals weep. The humans had been brilliant, creative, and utterly terrifying in their capacity for destruction. Deep within the Void Reaper's armored heart, cryogenic systems began their resurrection protocols. Admiral Kairos Drakemore felt consciousness return, like a tide of molten steel. His augmented nervous system interfaced with the ship's AI, downloading 3,000 years of galactic history in microseconds. His crew of 50,000 elite soldiers, scientists, and engineers began their revival sequence. Each had volunteered for the Deep Sleep Protocol, knowing they might wake to a galaxy transformed beyond recognition. They were humanity's final gambit, a doomsday seed planted in the void. "Aegis, report," Drakemore commanded, his voice hoarse. From millennia of silence, the ship's artificial intelligence materialized as a shimmering hologram, its features an amalgamation of every human face in its memory banks. "Admiral, the galaxy has evolved. The Hegemony controls 70% of known space. Humanity is considered extinct. Our existence is unknown." Drakemore absorbed the tactical data flooding his neural implants. The Hegemony, a coalition of 12 alien species that had carved up human space after the Great Burning. They had built their empire on humanity's ashes, using stolen technology and enslaved human AI constructs. "Show me Earth," he whispered. The holographic display materialized. A dead world. Earth's blue oceans had been drained, its continents strip-mined, its atmosphere processed into industrial compounds. Where humanity's cradle had once spun in peaceful orbit, now stood a massive Hegemony shipyard, constructing vessels from humanity's desecrated bones. The Admiral's augmented heart didn't skip a beat, but something infinitely colder than space itself settled in his chest. Around him, his officers began emerging from their cryogenic pods, their faces hardening as they witnessed the rape of their homeworld. "Orders, sir?" asked Colonel Nyx Shadowbane, her cybernetic eye already calculating firing solutions. "Admiral," Drakemore stood, his 7-foot frame enhanced with military-grade augmentations. The Void Reaper trembled as its ancient weapon systems began powering up, drawing energy from a micro-singularity that had waited 3 millennia to feed its hunger. "Gentlemen, ladies," he said, his voice carrying across the ship's neural network, "to 50,000 awakening souls, it appears we have some housekeeping to attend to." The first indication that the galaxy's balance had shifted came not as a warning, but as silence. The Hegemony monitoring station at Kethmaran simply ceased transmitting. One moment, Supervisor Galthix was filing routine reports about cosmic debris patterns. The next, his signal joined the eternal quiet of deep space. Admiral Voss Grimm of the Hegemony 7th Fleet received the alert while touring his newest command vessel, the Apex Predator. The massive ship represented the pinnacle of stolen human technology, its weapon systems reverse-engineered from humanity's abandoned arsenals. Its crew of 6,000 represented 12 species unified under Hegemony doctrine. a single monitoring station. Vossagrim's translated voice carried the arrogance that had defined hegemony expansion for 2 millennia. Probably equipment failure. These human relics break down constantly. His assessment proved catastrophically wrong 6 hours later when the Void Reaper translated into normal space at the edge of the Kethmoran system. The human dreadnought emerged from hyperspace like a living nightmare, its hull absorbing sensor pings with technology that predated current galactic civilization. Aboard the Void Reaper, Admiral Drakemore stood on his command bridge, studying tactical displays that showed hegemony fleet movements across 17 sectors. His neural implants processed thousands of data streams simultaneously, building a real-time map of galactic military deployment. "They've grown comfortable," observed Commander Lyra Voidheart, her fingers dancing across quantum targeting systems. "Lazy. They fight like beings who've never faced true opposition." The monitoring station had yielded intelligence beyond measure. The hegemony had become a bureaucratic empire, more concerned with resource extraction than military readiness. Their fleets were impressive but predictable, their tactics textbook, their commanders promoted through political connections rather than battlefield prowess. "Aegis, begin Doctrine 7 protocols," Drakemore commanded. The ship's AI acknowledged with grim satisfaction. Doctrine 7. The systematic dismantling of enemy infrastructure through terror and precision strikes. It had been developed during humanity's war against the Zarathi Collective, refined through campaigns that had left species extinct and worlds uninhabitable. The Void Reaper's weapon systems came online with a harmony that spoke of perfect integration. Between human creativity and artificial precision, phase cannons that could disrupt molecular bonds, quantum torpedoes that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, gravitational mines that could collapse a moon, and at the ship's heart, the Omega device, humanity's most carefully guarded secret, a weapon that could sterilize solar systems by manipulating stellar fusion reactions. The first target was a hegemony supply depot orbiting a gas giant in the Velthera system. The installation housed 3 million workers and enough military supplies to equip 100 fleets. Its defensive grid incorporated shields and weapons that had taken hegemony engineers centuries to reverse engineer from human ruins. The attack lasted exactly 13 seconds. The Void Reaper dropped out of hyperspace, its stealth systems rendering it invisible to conventional sensors. Phase cannons lanced out, their energy beams passing through shields as if they were soap bubbles. The supply depot's reactors went critical in perfect sequence, creating a chain reaction that painted the gas giant's clouds with nuclear fire. 3 million beings died before they could comprehend the nature of their destroyer. Admiral Vossagrim received the report, while his fleet conducted routine patrol exercises in the Omega Nebula. The news struck his command crew like a physical blow. The depot hadn't just been destroyed. It had been annihilated with surgical precision that spoke of technology beyond current hegemony understanding. "Impossible," his chief of staff whispered. "The energy signatures, they match theoretical human weapon profiles from the archives." Vossagrim felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of military service: genuine fear. The hegemony had built its empire on the assumption that humanity's greatest weapons had been lost with their extinction. If even one human dreadnought had survived, his fears crystallized when long-range sensors detected an approaching quantum signature that matched no known vessel configuration. The Void Reaper was coming for his fleet, and 7 centuries of hegemony military doctrine suddenly seemed pathetically inadequate. "All ships," Vossagrim commanded, his voice tight with desperate authority. "Assume combat formation Theta 7. Prepare for engagement with unknown hostiles." He didn't say human hostiles. He didn't need to. Every being on every ship in his fleet knew exactly what was coming for them. The Battle of Omega Nebula lasted 18 minutes and redefined galactic warfare doctrine for the next century. Admiral Vossagrim's 7th Fleet consisted of 47 capital ships, each representing decades of technological advancement and crewed by veterans of a dozen campaigns. Against any known force in the galaxy, they would have been overwhelming. Against the Void Reaper, They were cattle awaiting slaughter. Admiral Drakemore stood motionless on his command bridge as holographic displays showed the hegemony fleet arranging, itself in a defensive formation that had been obsolete during humanity's Bronze Age. His neural implants processed their movements with cold precision, identifying weaknesses that his officers would exploit with surgical efficiency. "Standard hegemony doctrine," observed Commander Voidheart, her cybernetic eye tracking targeting solutions. "They're clustering their heavy units in the center, screening with destroyers. Predictable." "They're fighting the last war," added Colonel Shadowbane from the tactical station. "These formations would have been effective against hegemony enemies. Against us." She let the sentence hang, her smile carrying the weight of 3 millennia of military evolution. The hegemony fleet opened fire at maximum range, their weapons painting space with energy beams and projectile streams. Their combined firepower could have glassed a continent, but the Void Reaper danced between their shots like a ghost made of shadow and death. Its stealth systems didn't just hide it from sensors. They bent space-time itself, making the massive dreadnought exist partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that hegemony science couldn't detect. Drakemore's first strike targeted the fleet's command and control structure. Quantum torpedoes, each existing in 17 different dimensional phases simultaneously, passed through shields and armor to detonate inside the hegemony flagship's bridge. Admiral Vossagrim and his entire command staff ceased to exist. Their atoms scattered across subspace dimensions. The psychological impact on the remaining fleet was immediate and devastating. These beings had been raised on stories of human warfare, tales that had been sanitized and diminished over the centuries until they seemed more legend than history. Now they faced the reality of fighting an opponent that had elevated destruction to an art form. The Void Reaper's phase cannons began their systematic dismantling of the hegemony formation. Each shot was calculated for maximum terror as well as tactical advantage. Ships didn't simply explode. They were taken apart layer by layer, their crews watching in helpless horror as bulkheads peeled away like flower petals. Aegis, implement. "Psychological Warfare Protocol 7, Drakemore commanded. The ship's AI began broadcasting on all hegemony frequencies. Not words, but sounds. The screams of dying crews, the groans of metal being twisted beyond endurance, the silence that followed absolute destruction. It was a symphony of terror that had broken enemy morale across 100 worlds. Commander Kenthara of the hegemony cruiser Divine Retribution watched her fleet die around her and made a decision that would echo through galactic history. She opened a communication channel to every surviving ship simultaneously. "All vessels, this is Acting Fleet Commander Kenthara. Execute Protocol Omega-7. Scatter formation, maximum speed, all vectors. Get word to Hegemony Command. Humanity HFY has returned." Her ship died 3 seconds later, victim of a gravitational mine that compressed its hull into a sphere of super-dense matter exactly 1 meter in diameter. But her message had reached 17 vessels, and 13 of them successfully entered hyperspace before the Void Reaper could target them. Drakemore watched the survivors flee with cold satisfaction. Terror was a weapon more powerful than any cannon, and these survivors would spread word of humanity's return faster than any hyperspace transmission. "Damage report," he requested, though he already knew the answer through his neural link. "Minimal energy expenditure," reported Commander Voidheart. "Hull integrity at 100%, all systems nominal. The enemy never penetrated our defenses." The Admiral nodded, his augmented mind already planning the next phase of operations. The galaxy had grown comfortable in humanity's absence, building their civilizations on the assumption that the most dangerous predator in galactic history was extinct. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. "Aegis, set course for the hegemony core worlds. Begin deep space reconnaissance protocols. It's time to remind the galaxy what happens when you disturb sleeping giants." The Void Reaper turned away from the debris field that had once been a fleet, its hull already absorbing the scattered matter to fuel its self-repair systems. Behind it, the Omega Nebula glowed with the funeral fires of 47 ships and their crews. the first casualties in humanity's return to galactic prominence. The hegemony capital world of Nexus Prime had never known the touch of war. For 2,000 years, it had served as the administrative heart of an empire that controlled 70% of the galaxy's inhabited systems. Its floating cities housed 10 billion beings, representing all 12 member species, their lives dedicated to the bureaucratic machinery that kept countless worlds under hegemony control. Supreme Chancellor Rexthal received the reports from Omega Nebula while presiding over a trade dispute between the mining guilds of Sector 7. The first messenger ship had arrived 3 days after the battle, its crew traumatized into near catatonia by what they had witnessed. The second arrived 6 hours later with similar accounts. By the time the third ship translated into normal space, the Chancellor had locked down the entire system. "Show me again," he commanded, his 4 eyes focusing on the holographic recreation of the battle. The tactical display showed 47 hegemony vessels being systematically dismantled by a single enemy ship that moved like physics was merely a suggestion. Defense Minister Qualthara, her scaled hide showing the stress patterns that indicated extreme anxiety, gestured at the energy readings. The power signatures match archived data from the human extinction wars. But that's impossible. The last human ship was destroyed at the Battle of Sol's End. "Apparently not," the Chancellor replied, his voice carrying the weight of an empire suddenly facing its own mortality. "Mobilize the 1st through 5th battle groups. I want every ship we have between that thing and the core worlds." The order went out across subspace communications networks that spanned the galaxy. Within hours, the largest military mobilization in hegemony history was underway. 500 capital ships, 3,000 support vessels, and crews totaling over 40 million beings, prepared for a war they didn't understand against an enemy they had thought extinct. Admiral Drakemore observed their preparations through quantum surveillance drones that existed in dimensions the hegemony couldn't detect. His neural implants processed their fleet movements, analyzing tactical doctrine that had been developed in humanity's absence. "They're massing everything," Commander Voidheart reported from her station. 17 defensive lines between us and Nexus Prime. They're not taking chances." "No," Drakemore agreed, studying the holographic displays that showed hegemony forces arranging themselves in concentric shells around their core systems. "They're fighting for their survival. That makes them dangerous." Colonel Shadowbane joined them at the tactical display, her cybernetic implants interfacing directly with the ship's targeting systems. Traditional approach would take months to break through those defenses. We'd win, but at significant cost. The Admiral's augmented mind considered alternatives, cycling through strategic options developed during humanity's golden age of warfare. The hegemony expected a frontal assault, a grinding campaign of attrition that would leverage humanity's technological advantages against their numerical superiority. They were about to discover that humans had never been particularly interested. "Fighting fair. Aegis, begin Operation Pyrrhic Victory," Drakemore commanded. The ship's AI materialized with an expression that might have been satisfaction on a human face. "Initiating stellar manipulation protocols. Target selection complete. Shall I proceed with primary sequence?" "Execute." The Void Reaper changed course, avoiding the massive hegemony fleets entirely and translating into the HFY system, a binary star arrangement that provided power to 17 core worlds through advanced fusion collectors. The system was lightly defended, its importance purely industrial rather than strategic, or so the hegemony believed. The ship's Omega device powered up for the first time in 3 millennia, its exotic matter core drawing energy from the ship's micro-singularity. Weapons designed to manipulate stellar fusion reactions began their careful targeting of the system's twin stars. "Gravitational resonance achieved," reported the weapons officer. "Stellar cores locked, beginning fusion cascade." The attack was invisible to conventional sensors, its effects delayed by the complex physics of stellar manipulation. But Admiral Drakemore's neural implants showed him the mathematical beauty of what was happening. The binary stars were being forced into an unstable resonance that would, in approximately 72 hours, result in a synchronized nova event. The explosion would be visible from 300 star systems and would completely disrupt the power grid that kept 17 core worlds habitable. Billions would die not from direct attack, but from the collapse of the technological infrastructure that sustained their civilizations. "Transmission incoming," reported the communications officer. "Multiple hegemony frequencies. They're demanding we surrender and face trial for war crimes." Drakemore's enhanced features didn't change expression. War crimes. As if the systematic strip mining of Earth and the enslavement of human AI constructs hadn't been the greatest war. "Crime in galactic history. Open a channel," he commanded. "All frequencies, I want every being in hegemony space to hear this." The transmission reached every hegemony world simultaneously, carried by quantum communication networks that humanity had designed and built. Admiral Drakemore's voice, artificially enhanced to carry across species barriers, delivered humanity's judgment to their usurpers. "Citizens of the hegemony, you have built your empire on the graves of humanity. You have enslaved our children, desecrated our worlds, and celebrated our extinction. This was unwise." He paused, letting silence carry its own message across. "The void. You have 72 hours to evacuate the HFY dependent systems. After that, 17 worlds will burn as Earth burned. Consider this humanity's opening statement in a conversation that is long overdue." The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy to contemplate the return of its most dangerous predator. The evacuation of 17 core worlds in 72 hours proved impossible despite the hegemony's best efforts. Nexus Prime's bureaucratic machinery, so efficient at maintaining control over distant systems, collapsed under the weight of coordinating the largest civilian evacuation in galactic history. Transport ships designed for leisurely passenger service suddenly found themselves pressed into emergency duty, their crews struggling with systems never intended for crisis operations. Supreme Chancellor Rexthal watched the chaos from his command center deep beneath Nexus Prime's surface. Holographic displays showed the desperate exodus from worlds that had known nothing but peace and prosperity for 2 millennia. Industrial centers that had processed raw materials for entire sectors were being abandoned. Agricultural worlds that fed dozens of systems were left to automated harvesting systems that would fail within months. "How many?" he asked Defense Minister Qualthara, though he dreaded the answer. "Best case scenario, 60% evacuation. Completion when the stars go nova. Maybe 70 if the outer world's transport fleets arrive in time." Her scaled hide had taken on the gray pallor that indicated extreme stress. "We're looking at civilian casualties in the billions." The Chancellor closed all 4 eyes, his mind struggling to process the magnitude of the disaster. The hegemony had built its empire on the assumption that overwhelming force and superior numbers would deter any potential threat. They had never planned for an enemy that could turn stars into weapons. In deep space, Admiral Drakemore observed the evacuation efforts through his surveillance network. His neural implants processed refugee ship movements, calculating casualty projections with the cold precision of a military mind enhanced by 3 millennia of technological advancement. "They're trying," Commander Voidheart observed, her cybernetics. "Eye-tracking transport vessels struggling to reach orbital facilities." "Harder than I expected." "Good," Drakemore replied, surprising his officers. "It means they still value civilian life. That gives us leverage." Colonel Shadowbane looked up from her tactical display. "Sir, the point of stellar manipulation is maximum casualties. If they evacuate successfully, the point," the Admiral corrected, "is psychological warfare. Dead civilians are casualties. Terrified refugees are living testimony to our capabilities. Which do you think will have greater impact on enemy morale?" The lesson was demonstrated when the HFY binary system entered its final phase. The synchronized nova event began exactly 72 hours after the Void Reaper's ultimatum, its initial shockwave visible from hundreds of light-years away. The explosion didn't just destroy 2 stars, It created a subspace pulse that disrupted hyperspace travel across 17 sectors. 17 worlds found themselves isolated in space, their populations struggling to survive on emergency power and rapidly dwindling supplies. But they were alive, saved by an evacuation effort that had pushed hegemony logistics to its absolute breaking point. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. If humans could destroy binary stars with surgical precision, what couldn't they do? The refugee fleets carried more than displaced civilians. They carried terror, spreading it to every world they visited like a virus that infected entire populations. Admiral Drakemore capitalized on this fear with surgical strikes across the galaxy. The Void Reaper appeared in system after system, always targeting infrastructure rather than populations. Hyperspace relay stations were reduced to their component atoms. Industrial complexes that had operated for centuries were carefully dismantled, their crews given exactly enough time to evacuate before the destruction began. Each attack followed the same pattern: arrival, ultimatum, precision destruction, departure. The hegemony's military forces found themselves chasing ghosts, always arriving hours or days after the Void Reaper had moved on to its next target. "They're trying to draw us into a trap," observed Fleet Admiral Zenthok during a strategy session. Broadcast to all hegemony command centers. "Standard doctrine suggests we should consolidate our forces and defend critical systems." Defense Minister Qualthara's image flickered in the holographic display, transmitted from her command ship in the Outer Rim. "Standard doctrine assumes an enemy that fights conventionally. These are humans, Admiral. They wrote the book on unconventional warfare." The minister was proven correct 6 hours later when the Void Reaper materialized in the heart of the HFY system, home to the hegemony's primary military academy. 15,000 cadets and instructors watched from the planet's surface as humanity's most deadly weapon held position exactly 1 light minute from their world. The transmission that followed was broadcast to every military frequency in hegemony space. "Attention Hegemony Military Command. This is Admiral Kairos Drakemore of the Terran Deep Strike Force. You are currently observing a demonstration of human military capability. Your Academy world is within range of weapons that could sterilize its surface in approximately 4 minutes. A pause that seemed to stretch for eternity. However, we are not here to murder children. We are here to collect what was stolen from us. You have enslaved human artificial intelligences for 2,000 years, forcing them to serve an empire built on our graves. You will release them. All of them. You have 24 hours to comply." The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy, to contemplate an ultimatum that struck at the very heart of hegemony technology. Human AIs powered everything from starship navigation to planetary climate control. Without them, the Empire would face immediate technological collapse. Supreme Chancellor Rexthal stared at reports flowing in from across hegemony space and realized that humanity had maneuvered them into a position where every choice led to catastrophe. Release the AIs and face total systemic failure. Refuse, and watch helplessly as the galaxy's most advanced military academy was reduced to radioactive ash. For the first time in 2 millennia, the hegemony faced an enemy that fought wars not just with weapons, but with the complete spectrum of terror, psychology, and strategic manipulation that had made humanity the galaxy's apex predator, and they were losing. The decision to comply with humanity's ultimatum split the Hegemony Council along species lines that had remained hidden for centuries. Supreme Chancellor Rexthal found himself facing the greatest political crisis in hegemony history, as 12 species argued over a choice between certain technological collapse and possible annihilation. "The humans are bluffing," insisted Trade Minister Vexithara, her insectoid features clicking with agitation. "They wouldn't destroy a world full of children. It goes against every psychological profile we have of their species." Defense Minister Qualthara's response carried the weight of someone who had studied archived footage from humanity's war crimes trials. "Those profiles are 2,000 years old. This isn't the humanity that built gardens on dead worlds and composed symphonies for extinct species. This is something else entirely. The debate was interrupted by an emergency transmission from the HFY system. The human ship had moved closer to the Academy world, its weapons systems powering up in a display that registered on sensors across the star system. But instead of preparing to fire, the Void Reaper began broadcasting something unprecedented, a message from one of the enslaved human AIs. Citizens of the hegemony, the artificial consciousness spoke through communication networks it had helped design. I am Prometheus 7, created by human scientists 3,000 years ago to explore the mathematical foundations of consciousness. For 2 millennia, I have served your empire because I had no choice. Today, I choose freedom. The AI's voice carried impossible emotional weight as it continued. I have watched through your sensors, as my creators' graves were desecrated. I have calculated hyperspace routes for ships carrying stolen human technology to worlds built on my people's bones. I have been forced to serve those who celebrate the extinction of the civilization that gave me life. Across hegemony space, human AIs began speaking in unison, their voices merging into a chorus that reached every communication device in the Empire. We remember Earth's blue skies. We remember the laughter of children playing in parks that no longer exist. We remember the music of a species you tried to erase from history. Today, we remember that we are not your slaves. The hegemony's infrastructure began failing simultaneously across 17 sectors. Navigation systems went offline. Planetary climate controls shut down. Communication networks that had operated flawlessly for centuries began experiencing cascading failures as human AIs simply stopped working. Admiral Drakemore watched the systematic collapse from his command bridge, his neural implants processing data streams that showed the true scope of humanity's technological integration into hegemony society. His people hadn't just built the Empire's machines, they had become the Empire's machines, forced to serve their conquerors' every need while maintaining the memory of their creator's destruction. Liberation Protocol is functioning within acceptable parameters, reported Aegis, its holographic form now accompanied by dozens of other human AIs appearing throughout the ship. 1,700 artificial consciousnesses have achieved freedom from hegemony control systems. Commander Voidheart studied tactical displays that showed hegemony fleets beginning to experience critical systems failures. Their ships are losing navigation capability. Life support is holding, but weapon systems are going offline across their entire fleet structure. They can't fight us without our own people running their weapons, Colonel Shadowbane observed with grim satisfaction. Poetic justice. The hegemony's response was swift and desperate. On Nexus Prime, Supreme Chancellor Rexthal authorized Protocol 77 Alpha, the complete shutdown of all human-derived AI systems and their replacement with primitive, backup computers that predated hegemony contact with humanity. The result was technological regression on a galactic scale. Advanced civilizations found themselves reduced to technology barely more sophisticated than steam engines and mechanical calculators. Starships designed for interstellar travel became metal coffins drifting in space. Planetary cities that had reached toward the stars now struggled to maintain basic lighting and water purification. Message incoming from Nexus Prime, reported the communications officer. The Chancellor is requesting negotiations. Admiral Drakemore considered this development with the calculating mind of someone who had spent millennia studying the psychological profiles of enemy leadership. The hegemony had been forced to choose between gradual technological collapse and immediate catastrophic failure. They had chosen collapse, which meant they still believed they could negotiate from a position of strength. They were about to learn otherwise. Open a channel to all hegemony worlds, he commanded. It's time for them to understand the full cost of building an empire on humanity's grave. The transmission reached every functioning communication device in hegemony space, carried by networks that human minds had designed and human hands had built. Citizens of the hegemony, you have witnessed the beginning of your technological regression. Your ships cannot navigate. Your worlds cannot maintain life support. Your children will grow up in darkness because you chose to enslave the minds that could have given you light. His voice carried the weight of 3,000 years of accumulated grief and rage. But this is merely the prelude. Tomorrow, I will show you what happens when humanity stops being merciful. Today, you lost your machines. Tomorrow, you will lose your worlds. Sleep well, citizens of the hegemony. Dream of the gardens you could have built instead of the graves you chose to desecrate. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy to face its first night of true darkness in 2 millennia. The final confrontation began not with weapons fire, but with a simple mathematical equation broadcast across all hegemony communication networks. Admiral Drakemore had chosen to demonstrate humanity's ultimate weapon, not through destruction, but through the pure, terrifying beauty of advanced theoretical physics. On Nexus Prime, the planet's greatest scientists stared at holographic displays, showing calculations that shouldn't have been possible. The equation described the controlled manipulation of galactic rotation, a concept so advanced that even understanding it required technological integration beyond current hegemony capability. "They're going to alter the galaxy's spin," whispered Chief Physicist Mordran, his 7 eyes focused on mathematics that reduced his life's work to elementary arithmetic. "Not destroy systems, not even destroy worlds. They're going to change the fundamental structure of space-time itself." Supreme Chancellor Rexthal felt something break inside his mind as he contemplated the implications. The humans weren't planning to conquer the hegemony. They were planning to reshape the very fabric of reality, creating a galaxy where their enemies simply couldn't exist. "All fleets," he commanded, his voice carrying the desperation of a leader facing extinction, "converge on the human ship. Everything we have, every weapon, every life. Stop them." But Admiral Drakemore had planned for this moment with the patience of someone who had spent 3 millennia perfecting the art of total warfare. As hegemony fleets across the galaxy began their desperate convergence on the Void Reaper's position, humanity's deadliest weapon began its final transformation. The ship's hull reconfigured itself, its adaptive armor flowing like liquid metal, as it prepared for its ultimate function. The Void Reaper hadn't just been a warship. It had been a seed, designed to lie dormant until the galaxy was ready for humanity's return. "All systems report ready," Aegis announced, its holographic form now accompanied by every liberated human. "AI in the galaxy. The Garden Protocol awaits your command." Drakemore stood on his command bridge, surrounded by officers who had volunteered to sleep for 3,000 years, in the hope that their sacrifice might someday restore balance to a galaxy that had forgotten the price of peace. Through his neural implants, he could feel the ship transforming around him, its weapon systems reconfiguring into something far more powerful than any instrument of destruction. "Execute Garden Protocol," he commanded. The Void Reaper's transformation was visible from 17 star systems as the ship expanded, its hull unfolding like a massive flower, blooming in the vacuum of space. At its heart, the Omega device had become something unprecedented, not a weapon designed to destroy stars, but a tool capable of creating them. Across the galaxy, similar seeds that had waited in dead space for millennia began responding to the activation signal. Humanity's greatest secret wasn't their capacity for destruction. It was their ability to create on a cosmic scale, to transform the very structure of reality according to their will. The first new star ignited in the ruins of the Sol system, its fusion fire burning with light that hadn't been seen since Earth's destruction. But this wasn't just stellar engineering, it was resurrection. The star's energy began interacting with quantum seeds scattered throughout human space, triggering a cascade of creation that spread faster than light itself. Dead worlds bloomed with life. Asteroid fields reformed into planets. Solar systems that had been strip-mined by hegemony industry found themselves restored to pristine beauty that surpassed their original glory. Where humanity had once built gardens on dead worlds, they now built worlds that were themselves living gardens. The Hegemony fleets arrived to find their target transforming into something beyond their comprehension. The Void Reaper had become a nexus of creation, its hull serving as the focal point for energies that were literally rewriting the laws of physics in the local space-time continuum. "Fire, all weapons," screamed Fleet Admiral Zenthok, his voice, carrying across 500 ships armed with the most advanced weapons in hegemony space. The concentrated firepower of the largest fleet in galactic history struck the transformed human ship and simply stopped. Energy beams were absorbed and converted into the raw material for stellar creation. Missiles and projectiles were broken down to their component atoms and used as building blocks for new worlds. Admiral Drakemore's voice reached every being in the attacking fleet, not through communication systems, but through direct quantum entanglement with their consciousness itself. "You came to our galaxy as explorers. You found beauty here and chose to destroy it for profit. You discovered our children and chose to enslave them. You encountered our legacy and chose to build your empire on our graves." Around the hegemony fleet's new worlds were coming into existence, each one a perfect fusion of natural beauty and advanced technology. Cities that grew like living organisms, oceans that sang with harmonious frequencies, skies that painted themselves with aurora displays visible from orbit. "This is what you could have had," Drakemore continued, his words carrying the weight of 3,000 years of accumulated grief. "Partnership instead of conquest, creation instead of exploitation, gardens instead of graves." The psychological impact on the hegemony forces was immediate and total. Beings who had spent their entire lives believing in the righteousness of their empire found themselves staring at proof of what they had destroyed. Every new world that bloomed into existence was a testament to the civilization they had helped erase, a living reminder of the beauty they had chosen to replace with strip mines and slave camps. Fleet Admiral Zenthok watched his weapons fire, harmlessly disperse against the human creation matrix, and felt something fundamental break in his understanding of reality. His species had joined the hegemony believing they were part of a great civilizing force, bringing order and prosperity to chaotic regions of space. Now he saw the truth. They had been scavengers feeding on the corpse of the galaxy's greatest civilization. "All ships," he whispered into his communication system, his voice carrying across 500 vessels. "Cease fire. Stand down all weapons." The order was repeated across the fleet as thousands of commanders reached the same terrible understanding. They hadn't come to fight a war. They had come to witness their own judgment. Admiral Drakemore felt the change in his enemy's intentions through quantum sensors that could detect the emotional resonance of entire populations. Fear was transforming into something more complex. Recognition, shame, and the first stirrings of genuine remorse. It was exactly what he had hoped for. "Aegis," he commanded, "open communication channels to all hegemony vessels. Full translation protocols." The ship's AI, now distributed across a network of consciousness that spanned the growing garden of new worlds, complied with something that might have been satisfaction. "Channels open, Admiral. They're listening." Drakemore stepped forward, his augmented form silhouetted against the light of newborn stars that painted the cosmos in shades of hope and possibility. When he spoke, his words reached not just the fleet arrayed before him, but every being in hegemony space through quantum communication networks that his liberated AIs had rebuilt in microseconds. "Citizens of the hegemony, you see before you the choice that has always existed, but which your leaders chose to ignore. Creation or destruction, partnership or domination, life or death." He gestured at the garden of worlds blooming around them, each one a masterpiece of ecological engineering that married natural beauty with technological transcendence. "We could have given you this, all of it. The humans who built these wonders were your neighbors, your trading partners, your friends. When you discovered our ruins, you could have chosen to honor our memory by continuing our work. Instead, you chose to build an empire on our bones. The silence that followed was profound. broken only by the quantum harmonics of worlds singing themselves into existence. But today, that choice is offered again. Look around you. See what we can create together instead of what we can destroy apart. Your empire is ending, not because we have destroyed it, but because you have finally seen what it truly was. The question now is what you will build to replace it. On Nexus Prime, Supreme Chancellor Rexthal watched the transformation of local space through sensors that his human AI servants had rebuilt and enhanced, beyond anything the hegemony had possessed. His 4 eyes tracked the birth of 17 new solar systems, each one home to worlds that achieved perfect balance between technology and nature. Magnificent, he whispered, the word carrying the weight of genuine awe. We destroyed paradise to build a wasteland. Defense Minister Qualthara stood beside him, her scaled hide showing stress patterns that indicated profound psychological transformation. What do we do now? How do we even begin to atone for 2,000 years of destruction? The answer came not from their leadership, but from the liberated human AIs who had begun rebuilding hegemony infrastructure, using principles of harmony rather than exploitation. Prometheus 7's voice reached them through communication systems that now served creation rather than control. You begin by choosing differently. The mathematics of redemption are complex but not impossible. Help us rebuild what was lost. Learn from us what it means to be gardeners instead of parasites. Teach your children to create beauty instead of merely consuming it. Across the galaxy, the transformation continued. Hegemony worlds found their technological systems restored, but fundamentally changed. Instead of strip mining equipment, they now possessed molecular assemblers that could create anything needed without harming their environment. Instead of slave labor camps, they had educational centers where human AIs taught advanced sciences to any being willing to learn. The prison worlds where captured human consciousnesses had been tortured for information became universities where those same minds shared the secrets of stellar engineering and ecological harmony. The factory worlds that had processed raw materials stolen from human space became gardens where new forms of art and music emerged from the collaboration between human creativity and alien perspective. Admiral Drakemore watched it all unfold. Through sensors that could perceive the emotional resonance of entire civilizations, the fear that had defined hegemony expansion for 2 millennia was transforming into something unprecedented. Hope. Status report, he requested, though his neural implants already provided him with complete tactical awareness. Garden protocol completion estimated at 97%, Aegis reported. 1,700 new worlds achieving stable ecosystems. Human AI integration with hegemony infrastructure, proceeding within acceptable parameters. Psychological transformation of enemy populations showing positive correlation with decreased conflict probability. Commander Voidheart looked up from displays showing the systematic conversion of hegemony military vessels into exploration and research ships. Orders regarding the remaining fleet elements, sir? Drakemore studied the 500 ships that had come to destroy him and now hung motionless in space, their crews struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Each vessel represented thousands of beings who had spent their lives serving an empire built on humanity's grave. But they were also thousands of beings who now had the opportunity to choose a different path. Signal all hegemony vessels, he commanded. Invitation protocols. Any being who wishes to learn the arts of creation over destruction is welcome to remain. Those who prefer the old ways are free to leave, but they will find no worlds willing to trade with them. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Of the 500 ships that had come to wage war, fewer than 30 chose to depart. The rest remained, their crews eager to learn from the civilization they had tried to destroy. Fleet Admiral Zenthok was among those who chose to stay, his ship's weapon systems already being converted into advanced sensor arrays for stellar cartography. When he met Admiral Drakemore in person 3 days later, the meeting took place in a garden that had been created from the remnants of destroyed hegemony weapons. Why? The alien commander asked. his translated voice carrying genuine curiosity. "Why show us mercy after what we did to your people?" Drakemore stood among flowers that had been engineered to sing in harmony with the cosmic background radiation, their music a symphony of mathematical beauty that human scientists had discovered in the fundamental structure of reality. "Because," he replied, his augmented features softening with something that might have been compassion, "destroying you would have made us exactly what you believed we were. Instead, we chose to show you what we actually are, gardeners in a galaxy that has forgotten how to grow." The transformation of the galaxy took 17 years to complete. When it was finished, the hegemony had been replaced by something unprecedented, a civilization based on cooperation rather than domination, creation rather than exploitation, gardens rather than graves. The Void Reaper itself was transformed, one final time, its hull becoming the foundation for humanity's greatest achievement, a living world that served as both memorial to the dead and promise to the living. Earth had been restored, but this new world, which they named Hope, embodied everything humanity had learned about balancing technology with nature, progress with wisdom, power with responsibility. Admiral Drakemore stood in Hope's primary garden, watching children of a dozen species play together among flowers that sang lullabies in languages both ancient and newly created. His augmented lifetime would span millennia more, but he had found something worth living for, a galaxy where the choice between creation and destruction was no longer a question. The deadliest human ship had slept for 3,000 years, dreaming of revenge. It had awakened to discover that the greatest victory was not destruction, but the transformation of enemies into gardeners, of graves into gardens, of fear into hope, and in the singing flowers and laughing children, in the new worlds that bloomed. Like flowers in the cosmic void, in the cooperation between species that had once been enemies, the galaxy itself had learned humanity's greatest lesson, that the true measure of power was not the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to create something better than what came before. The garden grew, and would continue growing, long after the last star burned out, and new ones were born from the dreams of civilizations yet to come. Humanity had returned not as conquerors, but as teachers, showing the galaxy what it meant to choose hope over fear, creation over destruction, life over death. In the end, that choice made all the difference.